Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender Ed, Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Tuesday, June 13th. And we'll be answering your questions, as I always do here, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern here. Good morning to the early birds in the chat. The YouTube chat, give me the thummy thumbs. Give me the thummy thumbs. Give me the subscribey scribes. Give me everything. Give me everything. Give me your money, right? Enter my contest with bad lineups so you can just give me your money or a portion of your money. A portion, but hopefully if you're tuning into this show, I'm going to teach you how to do that less and less. So I'm pretty much making it so you're not giving me your money in the DFS contests. We had James on yesterday on Mondays. Friday, we got the MMA stuff, the first look. We actually have a decent card, 14 fights ads. Like I'm expecting 3 to be canceled. As for some odd reason, that's what ends up happening. But hopefully we keep the 14 fights. We'll be talking about that on Friday. Tomorrow, there is no show. You will not see a thumbnail, or if you do, it'll be taken down. I got my monthly doctor's appointment that I need to go to. And of course, just like with dentists, like my dentist, like they close at like 2. And my doctor, my rheumatologist, they close at 3. What's up with that? What's up? People there, they open at 6 or 7 in the morning and then they close at 3 instead of doing it the other way. I live on the other schedule. I stay up late. I stay up until 1, 2 in the morning, right? So I don't wake up until 9, 10 o'clock. No, that's like halfway through these people's day. Why can't you just open at 10 and close at 6? That's much better from my schedule, but I guess normal people, they get up early and they go, okay, I'm going to go to the dentist before I go to work, like that type of thing. But whatever. It doesn't suit me, but that means I got to take a day off tomorrow, so no show tomorrow. But as always, when it's not Monday, when it's not Friday, when we don't have an MLB early slate, when Dean comes in and we do Grinders Live, I answer your questions. You send them in. Send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. I know sometimes I don't get to them for weeks at a time, but we cover them on the show. I use them as the fuel on what you want to know, even though sometimes, a lot of times, I repeat myself a lot, right? You could probably go back a couple of months, a couple of weeks, and find, the answers to the same questions, but that's fine. It's unstructured learning. If maybe you just found the show. Maybe you just found the show a couple of weeks ago. You don't know. You're not going to go through the back catalog of 450 episodes and find the nuggets that you need. Well, we try to make it easier. We label most of the shows, so you can search for topics like that. But if you want structured learning, if you want more structured learning, but just learn everything all in one shot, get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. How to think like a professional DFS player. The Fundamentals Masterclass. 15 hours of audio. And when you're done with that, go to the Theory of DFS for advanced players. How to apply those profitable DFS strategies in your games with a systematic, repeatable, time-efficient process. 10 chapters of audio, including James McCool's custom Microsoft Excel tools, which we've shown off on this show before. But get your questions in. If you want your questions answered, obviously you could show up, in the YouTube chat. I'll answer people's questions in the YouTube chat. That's fine. But as far as an overall like topics that we cover, like today we're gonna talk about ownership sum. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit back to basics. Right, this is covered in the Fundamentals Masterclass. The difference between ownership sum and ownership product. The purpose of that. How do you judge a lineup? Because remember, if you're not new to the show, we're talking about lineups, not players. Right? You play lineups in contests. You don't play players. Who do I play? It's like, no, what lineups do I play? You can play whoever you want. I mean, within some reason, right? Someone that is going to play at least. It's just how do you build the lineup around that player. So you can play a 1% owned player, but that will now change your decisions in the other spots in your lineup. The better way to look at it is looking at a lineup as a whole. So you're not just like plugging in this guy and then going, well, I'm plugging in that guy and then I'm plugging in this guy. That's why using a tool like Lineup HQ here at RotoGrinders, which you'll get if you're a premium member, right? one of the best tools on the market for optimization and lineup building. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. You'll get all of our projections also, which is you need those numbers, right? You need a way to turn player names into numbers and then organize the numbers better than your opponents. So we'll talk about ownership some. I see in the chat. MLB seems to have hit the point in the season where the fish are clearing out. With the NBA done, will there be a new influx? I'm not necessarily sure about that. I mean, MLB is not that casual friendly, I would say. I'd say MLB, out of like the major sports, is the one that I would say has a limited amount of truly horrible players. I know baseball is a little bit more for an older audience, I guess, right? They don't get that many young, new people into the game as far as watching it on TV. And maybe they're speeding up the game a bit this year, so that'll help. But I think NFL number one by far, right? Then NBA, and then there's a step down for MLB. The types of people that are playing a 14-game MLB slate on a Tuesday night, much less so from a Joe Schmo making a lineup on their toilet type of perspective than even the NBA playoffs, right? I just think it's more appealing to the audience that is more likely to be playing daily fantasy sports. I think that's the reason. But still, there's still plenty of edge in MLB. I mean, it's one of the main reasons why I really rarely have played MLB cash games. It's like, because now you get the segment of a segment, right? You already have, less bad players playing MLB, and the types of people that are attracted to double ups are typically the sharper players to begin with. But yeah, but it's I mean, I've been playing for almost 8 years now, and it's pretty, from a directional standpoint, it's pretty accurate to say that the beginnings of seasons has the most amount of casual interest, and as that goes on, it goes down and down. But you can monitor that in your contests, right? Download those CSVs, take a look at the lineups, compare the ownership, compare the projections of the lineups, and see how more and how less or more and more people, what percentage of the field. The two things that I look at when I look at the strength of a field predominantly is the number of 150 maxers. So what percentage of the contest is lineups that are from a user that has submitted 150 lineups. So for instance, let's say there's 10,000 entries. I mean, just using a bare basic example, just a dummy example. So let's say there's 10,000 entries in a contest, and there's 10 people that 150 max. So that's 1,500 lineups. So 15% of the contest would be 150 maxers. So let's say that number was 32,000. That 32% would be 150 maxers. So comparing that to, obviously, if you're playing large field, if you're playing the 20 max, how many people play 20 lineups? The people that play more lineups tend to be sharper. I mean, it doesn't mean all of them are, but it's hard to play 150 lineups a day and survive without being good. So yeah, I guess on a given day you may get one or two people that are really, they're not going to survive. You ain't going to see them in a year with them playing like that. But for the most part, 150 maxers are stronger players. Then the other thing to look at, regardless of ownership, is just the projections of the lineups. Okay? Because like some of the really bad lineups are really low projected. I mean, in comparison to what they should be. You'll see lineups in NBA that are 50 points lower projected than any of your lineups. Any of them. Right? What percentage of the field is that? Regardless if they're all 1% owned players. Who cares about leverage at this point? But typically the types of players that play lineups that are very, very lower, much lower projected than they should be for a contest are bad players. So in NBA, you may find at a certain threshold 5% of lineups, 7% of lineups. That the optimal is 285. You're playing lineups in the on the spectrum of the 262 to 274 range. And there are lineups in there with a 240 projection, with a 235 projection. It's like those, no matter what the ownership is, it's so low that, yeah, even when they do get leverage, they may still not get the first place. So how many of those lineups? Typically, those are people that don't use projections. They didn't play two of the absurd value plays. Those types of lineups. Those are the really bad lineups. Those are the lineups that give up 2x, 3x, 4x the rate. You want to judge those. Okay, how strong is the contest from that standpoint? MLB is a little bit harder because obviously you could give up a lot more projection in MLB than you could in NBA. But maybe you're counting the lineups. You're in a large field contest. Count the lineups that don't have at least a 4-man stack in the lineup, right? Because there are 4-3-1 lineups that are fine. There's plenty. There are 3-man, 2-man. There are those types of lineups that are plus EV. There's just not as many of them available. But if you just said, okay, what percentage of the field is 150 maxes? Okay, what percentage of the field is not using at least 4 players from one team? And you may find in some MLB contests that's 15% of the field. Okay, so judge that now a month from now, and then 2 months from now, and then whenever. And you can see by the end of the season, a lot of times that those numbers, the bad player numbers start going down, and the percentage of 150 maxers that make up a contest start going up. That's also due a lot of times to the sites resizing contests. That you'll start in the beginning of the season, you'll see, $15, 30,000 entries, and then halfway through the season, it'll be $18, 22,000 entries. And then you see towards the end of the season, maybe it's $22 and 16,000 entries. And a lot of the 150 maxers are 150 maxing regardless. And by the end of the season, 57% of the contest are 150 maxers. Versus earlier in the season, maybe it was only 24%. So to me, it's still a blunt way to judge, but it's some way to judge on are the contests getting harder and harder, right? And remember, we talked about this with where the money comes from. I'm much more concerned about the really bad players than the really good ones. I don't mind playing a contest that 60% of the field is 150 maxers if 20% of the field are really bad players, right? I don't mind that as much. If 25% of the field is 150 maxers, but only like 7% are really bad players, then you have a lot of mediocre stuff in the middle. Like that may be fine also. But those are the blunt ways, to me at least, of judging, where have the fish gone, right? We don't want to call them fish, right? They're not watching the show. The fish aren't watching the show. They got gills. They don't have, they go around their tank. They got eyes on 2 sides, whatever. They're not watching this. They ain't watching this. But we did have a question come in from Jason McGuffey. Hi, Blender. I was wondering, what is a good maximum ownership percentage for golf? Or what is the calculation to determine that? I remember you saying that 125% was a good one for Football Classic. I don't know if I don't quote me on that. I said bluntly, maybe on a specific slate, sure, maybe. But that is a 9 positions with positions limiting the field, etc. In a more open field sport like golf with no positions and 6 lineup spots, how does that work? Okay. First off, remember the two things. You're asking a bad question, right? Or you haven't gotten it. You haven't gotten the general concepts of DFS yet. Macro. That if you're asking a question that has a yes or no answer, or an answer that has an exact number, that means you're not thinking like a professional DFS player. You're not thinking in the right mindset. So, like, what is a good maximum ownership percentage for golf? Well, there is no number. There's no correct answer for that. Okay, you couldn't apply that to every slate. 100 on any slate. Like, no, that wouldn't be true. Okay. Secondly, is that ownership sum is it's blunt to begin with, right? There are some lineups that have a 108% ownership sum that are negative EV, and there may be another lineup with an exact same ownership sum of 108 and be plus EV, depending on the combinations of players in your lineup and the combinations of the field in their lineup. I'm going by technicality. So simply put, you can't just have like, oh, I just look for this range of ownership. Because the slate size matters also. The options matter also. An invitational in golf with like 24 golfers in the field. I mean, obviously, with so few options, most of the golfers are going to be way more owned than you would in a 156 player field, right? From a golf event, not the contest size. Then on that aspect, it depends on like how much value, like projection value there. Rory McIlroy is min priced. Well, he's going to be 40-something% owned. Like we see on these basketball slates where, 17 people are out and there's all these value, there's 3 or 4 guys that are going to be like 40-50% owned. It's like yeah, the optimal ownership sum for the optimal lineup is like 300. Yet on another slate with very efficient pricing, with like almost no value, everyone's like, okay, that's what they should be priced. The optimal would be like 110. So imagine going in and saying, this is the number, and every day I stick to that number. You can't. If anything, you're going to be using it relatively against something, some baseline. Now, one of the baselines, like in MLB, in any sport, the baseline on whatever your projected like optimal is. So, for instance, I pulled up our PGA projections for the U.S. Open, which is timely. We're talking about golf, right? U.S. Open is coming up on Thursday. So our projected optimal right now, based on our current projections, Fowler, Fleetwood, Rose, Im, Hatton, Schauffele. Okay? 18%, 22, 17, 7, 20, 23. So an ownership sum of 110. Okay? So if you want to use that as a baseline of like, well, if I play a lineup at 110%, I'm playing a lineup that seems that it's going to be way too high owned. Now, that number on a different slate could be 170. On another slate could be 85. It's like if you can want to use it as a baseline. Now, in a sport like MLB, where correlation matters a lot more, you're pretty much building 5-man stacks, 4-man stacks. You're building lineups like that. The optimal lineup that has 8 one-offs in it, you could still use as a baseline, but is it really a true baseline for a GPP? So it's quite possible in MLB, the optimal, the highest median projected lineup based on your projections, maybe 110%, 416 as a projection. But once you limit it to 5-man stacks, that projection comes down 4 or 5 points. So the highest median projected 5-man stack lineup is, if in baseball, if your optimal, no matter what, unstacked was 124, but stacked was 119, then you use 119 maybe as a baseline. So you're just finding a baseline. And then you're trying to look for lineups in concept, macro-wise, that have the highest projection for the lowest ownership. And as you go down in projection, you should also be going down in ownership as a broad concept. If you think in those terms. So, for instance, here in the golf, we have 110% owned lineup. Projected median 416. If you can find a lineup that was 416 that was only 90% owned, that would be a better lineup than this. Right? Oh, same projection, but like 20% less ownership. Like that benefits you. You're getting it for free. You're getting it for nothing. As you shed ownership and gain leverage, your projection should go down. Right? Unless it's wildly inefficient. Unless the field is playing wildly inefficiently. So as it goes down, you have to determine. There's no correct answer. You have to determine whether or not enough projection, if you shed 2 percentage points in projection in ownership on this lineup, and you have to sacrifice 40 points of median, that's probably too much, right? For only 2 percentage points of ownership, that's probably too much. Is it? I don't know. I can't say exactly. You'd have to run simulations to see, but most probably, I can almost guarantee you that it's too much. Okay, so using ownership sum, right? DFix says I use a percentage of max ownership sum possible and modify it based on games on the slate. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially what I said before. But obviously on smaller slates or whatever, the ownership number is going to be much higher. That you're using as a baseline. But this is the main reason why I can't just give you there's no number. 125. There's no number. Now you may see that similar size slates like in golf, if you're just constantly playing 155, 156, whatever player type, events. And the pricing is not like there's no like egregious pricing mistakes. You may find that most of the time the optimal lineup somewhere around 120 or something like that. You may. That doesn't mean you apply it to every slate because some slate the Masters, right? The Masters has a smaller field and like 20 or 30 of the golfers are almost like throw out. Right? The old people they used to win. Right? They get invited. You're probably not playing them. Right? So that baseline ownership number for the optimal, the highest median projected lineup is going to be higher. Showdown, it may be even higher than that. The round 2 showdown contest, it may be higher than that. Travis Selby asks if I mentioned to James about going to update the DFS tools once you get back from vacation. Any updates? Not as of now, but I mean, we'll be talking this month about adding some upgrades. I mean, they're fine the way they are, right? You could still use them, but I think there's some functionality to make it a little bit easier. Some display things. They're not issues. I use the tools. I mean, this is kind of how it works. I use the tools and I go, that it would be easier if this was over there. And then I jot it down and I say, okay, let's get together with James and let's make it happen. And then other people email James, and they go, I would love to have it if it was this. I would love to say, and then we go through them and go, which would be the most useful for the bulk of people. But the functionality of the tools aren't going to, I don't see changing much. I think we'd be adding a new tool or anything like that. It's just making the ones that are currently there much more efficient, and make it so that it shows information in a way that you can make decisions quicker. Neil Jaworski says the duplication predictor tool gone. No, it should be there. I use it. Duplication prediction is very similar to ownership sum. So in the theory of DFS, the fundamentals masterclass, how to think like a professional DFS player, we talked about the difference between ownership sum and ownership product. Okay? Because let's say, for instance, we're going to look at this lineup right here. Fowler, Fleetwood, Rose, Im, Hatton, Schauffele. Okay? It contains, it's a 50K lineup, 110% ownership. Sum. Right? If I take out Im at 7.8% owned, and I put in, let's say, okay, 7.8% owned. Let's see. Can we find someone in scored 5.4? Okay, let's put Im back. So I'm going to go down in ownership. I mean, I still want to use a sort of 50K lineup. But let's just say we put in Tom Kim there, right? Okay. So the ownership went down, what, like 2% or so? 403, right? Obviously, we dropped a whole bunch of projection points. But the difference between that, it's like, 2% difference in ownership sum could have a much more dramatic effect on the combinatorics of your lineup versus other players' lineups. So I showed this. This is the example from the course, right? A very blunt way of comparing lineups to each other as far as, duplication. And do you have enough leverage? Essentially, do I have enough leverage? Am I low owned enough? I say in the course, multiply the ownership numbers of every player in your lineup. So here we have Fowler, 18%. I'm going to cut off the decimals just to make it quicker. 18%, 22%, 17%. Sungjae Im was 7%. Hatton, 20%. Schauffele, 23%. So if you put it in, right? All these numbers, and then you multiply it by the field size. So this current large field for the U.S. Open is 142,000 or so. I think 340 something, whatever, 142,000. So when you do that, you get the number of 3.078. So like, given with not considering correlation or anything or common and nothing, if you just multiply these numbers and then multiply it by the field, you should expect on average 3 lineups to represent 3 lineups in the contest. Now, with the amount of options that you can choose from in golf, if you're getting duplicated, like that's not a good thing, right? There's enough options that you shouldn't be playing lineups that are being duped. So this expects to be duped 3.078 times, disregarding correlation and any other variables. Okay, and this is when you use ownership product. So ownership product, right? The ownership product of this is 2.16770 times 10. It's 0.0000216, whatever, right? And if we multiply it by the field size, you get 3.078. Let's say we take Sanjay Im's 7% and make it 5%. You've just like eliminated an entire lineup with 2 percentage points, right? On that one player of 7%. Let's say we took out, instead of this 22% owned player, we took out and replaced them with a 20% owned player. You see, we have left 2.79. There's way more combinations of this than there are once you have the 5% owned player. 2.79 versus 2.19. Even though the ownership sum, we're just dropping it 2%. Right? So that original lineup, 3.07, right? We got it right here. The ownership product of this original, right? This original highest optimal projected lineup. Let's say you drop 10, let's say you drop 6%. Let's call it 6. You go down to 104, right? There's a big difference between changing the 23% owned player to a 17% owned player. All right, that's 6 percentage points in ownership, right? So the sum is 104, right? But the product, once you account for the field size, 2.27. Let's take the same 6% off of the 7% owned guy. Look at what we're down. We're dramatically less. 0.439. 0.439. Same ownership sum, 104. But the ownership product of this lineup is much lower because we have a 1% owned player. The amount of combinations and lineups that are going to be played with a 1% owned player in a 142,000 person field. And we were talking about what? 1,420 lineups versus 7 times that. 7 times that for the Sanjay Ims, the 7% owned player. This is why ownership product is more precise than ownership sum. Ownership sum is better than nothing. It's blunter. It's typically integrated into tools like Lineup HQ and not ownership product. So it isn't the most precise, but it's better. It's better than judging it with no numbers. DFix says ownership product requires a lot more manual work or a pre-formatted sheet to calculate it for multiple lineups. Right. Because most builder tools use ownership sum and not ownership product. I've suggested to the development team that they do add ownership product to Lineup HQ, where you can display either. And it doesn't have to be 0.0000. We can make it so that ownership product, times 10 to the minus fifth or whatever. Just have it like that. So you have something to compare it to that way. So you don't look at lineups that have 104% owned. But dramatically, one could end up easily be 4 times more owned than the other lineup, even at the same ownership sum. But once you find a baseline, I mean, this is the general concept. This applies to all sports. And not cash games. Cash games, you don't care about ownership. You want the highest median projection. In GPPs, you want to share the least amount of points with your opponents while still having a high projected lineup that is owned the least, right? You want it to be owned the least. Because the points that you get that your opponents don't get are worth more to you. That's the concept of relative value. That's also in the course. So if you did build lineups, I mean, we've shown this process before, that if I'm just going to randomly build lineups. Just whatever, 20, I don't know. Right? So you can see here's that median optimal lineup. 416. 416. 416, right? We go down like this. Like as you go down, right? We take a look at these two lineups. Here's a lineup that projects for 414. Here's a lineup that also projects at 414. Right? 0.77, 0.797. It's a difference of 0.2. Not much. One lineup is 79% owned in some, and one lineup is 108% owned in some. Well, I mean, if you had to play one of these two lineups, I mean, obviously you play the first one. Why would you play a lineup that is projected the same at 30, nearly 30 percentage points more in ownership? You want to play the highest projected lineups for the lowest ownership. That's what you're looking for. You also don't want to play the highest owned lineups, and you also don't want to play the lowest projected lineups. It's like, hey, I found a lineup with 6 players that are all 0.5% owned. It's a total lineup ownership. The ownership sum is 4. What the hell's the projection? Are you giving up like 70 points in median projection in golf? That's like missing a golfer in your lineup. Those lineups are just too low projected. And you don't want to play the optimal. You don't want to play the lineup that most probably is going to be duped at least 3 times. Right? So you want to cut off that top and cut off the bottom. So looking through, you would look through and go, what lineups project the best for the least ownership? And these are ownership sums, which is blunt, but still effective. Be much better off if we saw the ownership product instead. A lineup with the lowest owned player being 9% versus the lowest owned player being 7% or 60, two single-digit owned, right, players. The combinatoric, the combinational, whatever you want to call it, ownership is going to be lower. The ownership product will be lower. So if you had to judge between 2 lineups at 87% ownership, maybe both could be plus EV. But which one would be better, higher EV than the other? The one with the lower ownership product. That's why you see, like, you could play, I'm going to play 3 50% owned guys. It's like, oh, how do you do that? Well, you have to play them with like a 3% on this and a 1% on that. So you get the ownership product down. The ownership sum could actually be quite high, but the product could be quite low. So when people say, "Oh, you can't possibly play the 2-3 chalkiest players together," of course you can. It's just that you have to make up for the duplicative effect of so many lineups that look like that by even lower owned players in the other spots. And then you'd be like, well, if I'm gonna fade all 3 50% owned players. It's like, well, your ownership sum could actually be higher than those lineups. It's just that you have 20% on this guy and 18% on that guy and 16. You have no single-digit owned players, and that lineup actually is plus EV. It has a higher ownership sum than the other one, but its ownership product is lower because it doesn't have 3 50% owned players in it. It has just a bunch of 10 to 20% owned players. It's quite possible both lineups could be fine. But this is how you would judge based on ownership sum. If you want to disregard ownership product at all, that's fine. This is blunter. You may see lineups here that are 88% owned, and you have 10 different lineups that are 88% owned. It's like, well, I only want to play one of them. If they're all projected the same and they're all 88% owned, most likely they're all going to be fine. Some may be better than others just on the basis of ownership product. That would be a more precise way. The goal here in DFS, when using blunt tools, is to be as precise as you can with blunt methodologies. Do you have a way to do you have a way of programming this all out? Do you have a way of building an algorithm to do all this for you? To run in the background and go through all combinations and simulations? No, you don't. So you have to rely on more blunt methodologies. So your goal isn't either I'm totally accurate or I don't play. Well, you're never going to get there. Even programming and simulations aren't 100% accurate, not even close. And also, it's on the basis of the numbers that are here. Justin Rose, 17%. That's projected ownership. Maybe he ends up coming in at 22%. Maybe he ends up coming in at 10%. That's going to dramatically change what the lineups you would have played had you have known that. That's one of the better ways of judging your play. Take a look at the actuals, the actual ownership, and go, had I known this, would I have played lineups that are similar to the ones that I have played? The answer is yes, then it doesn't matter if you came in last place. What are you going to do? But I think we'll call this episode, we'll go ownership sum. Is that ownership sum and product? Ownership sum and why not? We're throwing in another keyword, right? Ownership sum and product, just in case people are searching. Remember, product is more precise. Sum is more blunt. But both are better than you not doing any of this. And it's not, and even product is nowhere near precise. Even you're not even doing any type of programming. The duplication checker / predictor that we have in Theory of DFS for advanced players, like James has it that it also normalizes for salary. Like a 50K lineup is much more likely to be duplicated regardless of its ownership product compared to a $48,000 lineup with the same ownership product. Because people are more likely to play and spend most of their salary. So that logic is in that tool. Is it precise? No, it's not precise. Of course not. But it's more precise than what you're currently doing, probably. And your goal is to get from the more blunt to the more precise. There are people out there that don't use projections at all. They just, I don't know, wing it. I think this guy's going to do well. That's the most blunt way of doing something. You know what? That's a better way of doing it than banging your head against the keyboard or randomly picking people. Sure. Randomly picking people by banging your head against the keyboard is the bluntest way of making a lineup. Right? You know what's blunter than that? And what's more precise than that? Actually thinking about, oh, this guy may do well today. Is that the most precise? No, nowhere close. You'd rather have a reasonable projection model. That's going to be much more precise than you just winging it off the top of your head. So many people get to the point where, well, what's the most? If I can't have a time machine, I ain't gonna play like that. You're never gonna get there. A&S Comedy says, I feel like golf plays closer to MLB in the sense that a median projection means less due to the guys missing the cut. That's correct. Median projections in golf, I mean, we talked about this yesterday a little bit with James. Because golf players don't have normal distributions. Their distributions are much more bimodal. You basically have two different distributions. You have a distribution if they miss the cut, and distribution if they make the cut. And you'll get like two humps. So using just the median actually isn't a likely outcome. You're much more likely in golf to have players that have 30s and 70s rather than people that have like 52, like something in the middle. I mean, it happens, but I mean, In order to get that, like, you basically have to make the cut and then die. Right? You make the this guy made the cut and then shot like plus 13 the last 2 rounds. Like something like that. And then you also have like the 20s, 25s. Like, there's no one that made the cut that like has 25. Like, they would have to shoot plus 70. I mean, like, it would be stupid. I mean, how do you make the cut and end up with a lower score than someone that didn't even play round 3 and 4? Right? So the distributions will look different. Can you use the median projection to judge lineups? Yes, you can. But in golf, it wouldn't be the most precise. Still be a blunt way of doing it. Better than nothing. Better than not having any median projections at all. And just, I think this guy's going to do well off the top of my head, winging it. But yes, it's very similar to MMA. Like, you see MMA median projections, it's like even more bimodal. Like, this guy is going to score 5 or he's going to score 95. And they're 2 distinct humps. But it's rare that some of those types of guys score 54 points. But you can still use the median projection. It's something. It's better than nothing. If you have any questions about any of this, obviously, send them in. Questions@theoryofdfs.com. If you have any questions about ownership, right? Like we talked about today, projections. Lineup builder tools, using a lineup HQ. I can help you with that if you're struggling. If you're a premium member, you could join in on my Discord channel, in the RotoGrinders Discord. I do probably 2, maybe sometimes 3 coaching calls, private group coaching calls a month. We don't record them. Just basically shoot the shit. Share screens. Go in depth on stuff. Ask me whatever you want. We go through whatever. We have group conversations sometimes. We did last week. So I'd love for you to join. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month of RotoGrinders Premium by doing so. JWHS. Jordan, how much more minus EV would it be for me to open my DK app and click buttons haphazardly for golf than for me to build with optimizer sims, etc.? I would think dramatically so. Now, obviously, the variance in DFS is absurdly high. But if you were to judge over the scope of hundreds, if not thousands of slates, I think clicking buttons like a crazy person would be not profitable in comparison to actually considering all of this, right? By playing well. Yeah, I would guess. On any given slate, sure, yeah. Dude, someone can bang their head. Dude, we see lineups all the time. Of like, how did this person come up with that lineup? Bang their head against the keyboard. It happens. And when it wins, it wins. Okay, it won. It's negative EV. It won, but it's not going to win for another million years. I mean, so don't get dissuaded by like, oh well, any lineup could win. It's like, yeah, you're right. A meteor could hit the Earth tomorrow. We could all die. Well, what's the probability of that happening? It's not 0, but I mean, it's not high. So just because the probability of something being not high, right? You're betting a 20-sided die, but you're only getting paid 5-1. Like, you're gonna go broke betting like that. But you could still sit down and go, I guess 14. Then come out and it comes out 14, and you get paid $5 on your dollar. Oh yeah, you could win. But in the long run, you're just gonna be bleeding money. JWH asks, what do you think about golf odds for mismake cut now that they are double-sided? Yeah, I mean, you could use them. I mean, that's kind of factored, or that's technically factored into the median projection. Obviously, golfers that are more likely to make the cut will have higher median projections. But yes, two-sided markets are typically going to be much more efficient than one-sided markets. It's just even golf props, they're not the most liquid markets to begin with. They're not like small markets, but they're not They're not the most. They're not sides totals. They're not, NFL sides and totals are liquid markets. NBA sides and totals are liquid markets. Some of these props are not the most reliable, but it's something. It's better. It's better than nothing. Okay, hit that thumbs up button. Hit the like button on your way out the door. Remember, I won't be here tomorrow. Got a doctor's appointment, but I will be back Thursday. And just like Jason did, he sent this in May 3rd. So this was over a month ago. I keep them in my inbox. Send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. I pretty much answer them all. Or sometimes I see some that pile up that are similar to each other, and then I cover it all, and then it's like, I will reply back at any time. See, it's May 3rd. I'll even reply back live, right, to Jason, right? So you didn't even have to tune in, right? It'd be like, I asked a question, and who knows when it gets covered. I'm good. I answered this. I could just say, I answered this on today's show. So you know. I'll even get back to you, Sam, so that you know, today's show, let me go watch it. So you don't have to be here every day. I'd love for you to be here every day. But some of you aren't. Some of you aren't, Suki Singh and Wataz and Defek, and the regulars here. But if you're not a regular, subscribe. Be a regular. Hit that notification bell. We have tons of stuff on the RotoGrinders channel, right? We got Will's show before me, the Pick'em show. We got Grinders Live for baseball. We got golf stuff. We got tons of stuff here. So stay. Enjoy yourself. And I'll see you back on Thursday, answering your DFS strategy questions like I always do, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.